Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when you're moving out. I said, when you're moving out.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. That song means it's theme music, really. It means it's time for our weekly confab with Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Before we get to Ted, Jelly Belly was at Northwestern. Well, of course, he gave enough money to the law school and the med school. The family did. Why not?
Did you ever pass the bar? I don't even know if he took it.
Northwestern Law, Georgetown undergrad, I think, for Jelly Belly. Anyway, he was there to get Steve Carell's autograph or what?
Well, Steve Carell's daughter graduated yesterday, was among the crowd when he spoke at the law school graduation. And he was trying to be funny. He literally got up there and said, I know you guys would rather hear from Beyonce.
He's so hip. He's so current.
I mean, it was so cringe. And then
Right.
he kept talking about The Office, probably because Steve Carell was there, about, would an idiot do that? That's from the character Dwight, And but then he got a little ugly, It turned ugly. Guess who he ripped on? Just guess. President Trump and others. But I don't know if the crowd liked it.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing. Dwight Schrute.
Oh my God.
The entire efficacy of this incredibly useful piece of information hinges upon your ability to pick the right idiot. I wish there was a foolproof way to spot idiots, but counterintuitively, some idiots are very smart. They can dazzle you with words and misdirection. They can get promoted above you at work. They can even be elected president.
Yeah, and then he went on to say, too, later that, gender-affirming surgery will never be banned in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, Northwestern
Yeah.
Law School,
Yeah.
Speaking of which, one of its admittees is a dude named Ishani Chokshi. Trans, of course. Northwestern Law gave this guy his own law journal, which published his screeds likening judges' gavels to dildos.
Oh.
Last month, a year after he graduated, that was last year, a law journal published a legal paper, quote unquote, by him that detailed his purported sexual escapades with 7 men. The Northwestern Law's Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology published an article entitled Of Law and Men, attributed to Bad Gal Tranny, which is an alias of this guy, Ishani, in which he wrote, I, an Indian-American transgender woman, share stories of my sexual escapades with 7 Trump supporters. Northwestern's Law Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology published this. Among his demonstrations of the keen legal mind he possesses during his time, in August 2021, the Northwestern University Law Review, its most competitive journal, as the Law Review is at any law school, published an article by this guy, Ishani, in which he explained how he argued a mock case by saying, quote, in closing, I would like to note that I am a trans woman of color, and so you should decide for me. That's now a legal argument. Maybe Trump needs a trans woman of color,
Right.
to defend him. So when he gives his closing, he can say, I'm a trans woman of color, decide for me, just like Ishani said. This guy is a mess. And more than that, if that's not obvious, the lack of academic rigor, subordinating that to identitarianism. Speaking of the lack of academic rigor, perfect segue for Ted Dabrowski to join us. Ted, thanks for being with us as always.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
Speaking of lack of academic rigor and how that impacts marginalized communities, to use the left's lingo, that study you guys published about the reading and math proficiency of Latino students in CPS, how's that being received by CPS and at high schools like Juarez?
Well, it was funny. We actually did the press conference outside of Benito Juarez, just for people who didn't get to see the study. So we looked at how well the Hispanics were doing in CPS, because they are almost 50% of the entire school. So think about that. That's becoming almost a Hispanic dominant school. And not only that, but Hispanics are the fastest growing demographic in Chicago. So if you think about Chicago's future, you better be thinking about how today's Latino students are doing, because they're going to be a big part of the future of Chicago. And when you look at it, right, it's the typical results we've talked about. Just 17 out of every 100 kids can read at grade level across the entire system, and just 12 out of 100 can do math at grade level. But in the Benito Juarez, where we held a press conference to talk about this report, there's 1,700 students at this Benito Juarez community high school, and only 70 can read at grade level, and only 46 of them can do math at grade level. Those are phenomenal numbers for a 1,700 kid school. So we're there to hit on CPS failing the Hispanic kids. What's interesting is that we got some coverage from Telemundo, from Univision, and also from Fox 32 and WBBM. So there was some interest in that, and I think it's because the numbers are so bad. Of course, CPS pushed back and said, "Hey, look, we're just like every other big city, right? We have the same results as other big cities, so no big deal. And also, we had the pandemic, so it's all good."
Yeah,
So,
and they're
they
mad because
just-
your report came out on the same day that they were celebrating this $2.2 billion that the seniors received in scholarships. So they didn't like that too much.
It was also the last day of school, so but they tried to chase us away from the campus, but they let us stay because we're right off the campus.
So they conceded. They conceded your numbers, though. This is important. So they didn't say, "Oh, that's not true." They didn't say, "Oh, that's not true," and we have our own numbers that we'll never show you. That they didn't try that.
No, you're right. You're right, Dan. It's a big improvement, because last time when we came out with a bigger statewide report, Pritzker said the numbers were wrong. And again, we kept pushing the fact that the numbers were his numbers. They're coming straight from the State Board of Education. This time around, they didn't say the numbers were wrong. They just said that we're just like any other big city. So,
yeah.
The whole thing is, you can't fix a problem until you acknowledge it, and that's the big push we're having. Is when you have a handful of kids reading at grade level, we're talking about destruction. Well, we already have a big problem in Chicago. But when CPS, which is now 90% Black or Hispanic, when they can't read and do math, it spells a deep trouble for the future of Chicago, as if it already didn't have enough problems.
And it just gets uglier, at least for those paying attention, which is almost nobody. But we talked about this yesterday, that Stanford University report on charter schools versus the charter school performance versus traditional public school performance. And the finding, particularly in New York City, but not limited to New York City, they looked at more than 24 cities, that charter schools are just dwarfing the performance of their local school peers in terms of math and reading proficiency.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that for New York. I can't say the same thing for Chicago. I looked at it a few months ago, and there's, there are, of course, a few good charter schools, but overall the results were somewhat disappointing. And that's why, I've seen in Chicago, some people say they support public school choice. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. School choice, right, means any kind of school. But charters, I'm glad they're doing well in New York, but I can't jump up and down about them in Chicago in particular, because the unions have such a big hold here.
Exactly.
That, if they're not unionizing them now, they will be very shortly, because the bigger charters get, the more that the unions will say, then we belong in there too, and then the game is over.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. even with the performance of Success Academies and other charter school outfits in New York, to remember the only way this works, if you're going to cede control of a city or a state to the unions, which Illinois has done, which New York has done, is for full choice, because ultimately the unions will come either from the through the back door or right through the front door in the case of Chicago, and take over or diminish the real competition that exists, because they'll poison those charter schools the same way that they did the local schools. I mean, the funny thing about charter schools, of course, is what's a charter school? It's a school that doesn't have to abide all of the onerous red tape and silliness that the public schools inflict upon the families that they attempt to serve. So, I mean, I always found this so silly. So if you believe that charter schools are better because they can operate more freely, less encumbered, then why wouldn't you do the same thing system-wide? And why would you limit it to just government-run schools? I mean, that's the charter school proponents who stop short of full school choice don't even understand the logic of their own argument or their position.
Yeah, well, and actually what it means, Dan, is that they're those people who don't support private school choice, only public school choices. They're part of the system. They're part of that public system where the money is controlled by the government, controlled by the unions, and funneled by them to the different schools. And so they want to be part of that club of controlling the money. So that's the obvious thing.
Well, speaking of unions, CTU, I mean, they're getting whatever they want with Mayor Brandon Johnson on the 5th floor. They got their 12 weeks paternity leave for birthing people. And now they get to keep those COVID sick days that they had last year.
Isn't COVID done?
Oh, no, it's done when we say it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, fascinating, right? So they get to keep, the 5 days of sick leave that they can use going forward, and they get 2 additional days. And that's for the next school year. I thought we had finished the COVID pandemic, but there's a lot to be said about that thing. One, and I haven't read the details of this one, but a lot of these sick days never go used, and what teachers get to do on sick days, and in general, maybe not these, but Indiana has the same effect. Sick days get banked by teachers. If they don't use them, they get to keep them as a years of service, and so at the very end, they can stack up all their unused sick leave up to 2 years worth and turn it in as 2 years worth of service. Mm-hmm. So it's really a pension sweetener, massive pension sweetener.
You have updated numbers on the outmigration from Illinois in 2021. What are they? Yeah,
so Governor Pritzker keeps denying these population losses, but there's every source of data, we've talked about it. You got the U-Haul, you've got the IRS data. The IRS data is great because it's like straight from returns, but this is census data, and they just came out and they just gave out the state-by-state migration numbers. So, it confirms what they already said before, that we lost almost 150,000 residents to other states. When you count the ins and the outs of people moving between states, we lost 150,000, the third worst in the country, only behind California and New York. But what's really fascinating, my favorite part is this. We're getting our butts beat by our next door neighbors. We were a net loser to every single one of our neighbors. We lost 19,000 on net to Indiana, 17,000 on net to Wisconsin, 15,000 on net to Missouri. It's so easy to move over the border now. And what's funny is, we on our Twitter accounts, we get all kinds of people saying, "Oh, I'd never go to Indiana." Well, lots of people are going to Indiana. It's just a lot cheaper. It's a better managed state. And your house value will go up and your tax bills won't. It's becoming a slam dunk for many people.
He is Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Ted, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
It seems like everyone is on a complicated diet these days. Gluten-free, keto, metabolic, sugar-free. And with these diets comes special dietary protocol and food products. You can find plenty of advice on your social media sites, but you need expertise to purchase the right food items. A visit to Lil's Dietary